Welcome, fans, to another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast live here on thehannibaltv.com. And this afternoon, I'm very pleased to have a man on the podcast who has had an incredible career. We're gonna get into it, not only in terms of notable opponents and notable matches, but just the incredible number of countries the man has worked, including a period of time in the World Wrestling Federation, which we'll cover as well. But we have with us the one, the only Joey Legend. Joe, thanks for coming on today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. I've watched a lot of your content on YouTube, so I'm kind of honored to be next in line to get on board. Thank you for having me.
Well, we really appreciate it. I like to. I know you're Canadian and from the Greater Toronto area, unless I'm mistaken.
Scarborough,
Growing up, were you a fan of professional wrestling per se?
Initially, I wasn't, but I didn't really know it. Right, I was more watching football, though everybody else in Toronto was watching hockey. I was more into football. But I was watching that for a while, and then when I was 10 years old, I got into martial arts. So I did that. I did karate and kung fu for 10 years and got a few black belts. And then when I was about 15, my dad wanted to take me to Scarborough Arena. He said, we're going to go see the wrestling, because his brother wanted to take his son. So it was going to be kind of like, you know, the two brothers taking their kids on a day out type thing. So we went to Scarborough Arena, and I was going to hang out with my cousin and watch the show. And I didn't know what it was. They said, we're going to go watch wrestling. So I showed up, and my dad kind of pulls me aside ahead of time and says, listen, just so you're not freaked out, you know, this is, it's a work. You know, he kind of gave me the ins and outs of how it works. I was like, well, what the hell am I doing here then? Why do I want to watch that? You know, but we got in, and by the end of that event, it was about a 3-hour event. By the end of it, the main event was Bobo Brazil and the original Sheik in a cage.
Oh, wow.
And Sheik fireballed Bobo, and there's blood everywhere. But the end of that show, I was a fan, like rabid fan. I couldn't wait for the next one. I started collecting magazines. Bobo Brazil was kind of the first one I was a huge fan of. And weirdly enough, I bought a Bobo Brazil picture at the merch stand. I was getting autographs from everybody. And my dad introduced me to this black guy outside Scarborough Arena. He says, oh my God, look at this. You gotta get his autograph. And I got his autograph. Didn't know who he was. I got it basically as a favor to my dad. Found out years later it was Sweet Daddy Siki, the guy who eventually trained me to wrestle. So my whole kind of life, my whole future piled onto me in one day. That day at Scarborough Arena.
Wow, that's quite a story. So then you began following, I guess, Maple Leaf Wrestling, the Tunnies, and some of the Detroit stuff.
But also, I was also watching the Montreal stuff. That was on City TV on Saturday afternoons. So I was watching the Brito family, International. I got to see some of the AWA stuff on TSN. And I got to see some of the Stampede stuff. I also watched, I can't remember it. There was a show that used to have clips of everything but WWF once a week on TSN. I used to watch that too. I couldn't get enough. I watched everything.
Was that that was with Ed Whalen, correct?
That's right, yeah. That's
Pro Wrestling This Week?
Pro Wrestling Plus. That was it.
Pro Wrestling Plus. There you go. Yeah.
I had to do the voice to remember it.
Yeah. I haven't thought of that in a while. That was similar to the Joe Pedicino.
Clips from the Pedicino thing.
Yeah, all
I
the
I still have videotapes. That's how old I am. I have videotapes, not even DVDs. Tapes and tapes of that show. I tape it every week.
That's cool. Me too. So what? You had this burgeoning fandom. What was the seminal factor that made you decide to pursue wrestling as a career option?
The standard thing is that I had like 4 black belts, and I realized I could kick the ass of anybody in the unemployment line. Wasn't making me any money. So I thought, well, I got to do something for a living, and I am terrified of 4 walls. I don't want to be alphabetizing insurance forms or, you know, working a press in some factory somewhere. I want to get and see the world. And wrestling seemed to be that option. If I'd only seen WWF, that I don't know if I would have pursued it, because it just would have seemed too big and too far off. But when I went and saw Scarborough Arena stuff, and when I'd watch like the Vancouver promotion, they were a BC All-Star, I see Michelle Starr and all those guys out there. I thought they've got something going on too. They seem to be traveling and they're talking about trips to, Japan and stuff like this. If they can do it, why can't I? And these magazines all have wrestlers I've never seen. And everybody seems to be getting press coverage and making a living. So why don't I pursue that? So I sought out Sully's Gym in Toronto, Sweet Daddy Siki and Ron Hutchison. And they gave me, they were the honest ones. There was another guy out there. His name was Mac Maya. And he had a wrestling gym too. There was two in Toronto only. And this is back when Ontario was heavily regulated. There was like nothing going on for wrestling. If there was, they used only the old timers because they at least knew they could trust the old timers to do the right thing in the ring. So I went to Mac Maya's gym and he gave me a huge speech. And he had a great facility. He had a great weightlifting gym and a ring. And he had this girl trainer. I don't know her name. I think her name was Christine or something. A great big bodybuilder chick. And she apparently just come back from Japan. They had posters all over the place of it. And he gave me the big story about how he'd make a star out of me. Me and two of my buddies went. And then he told me that, back when he trained John Studd, that was when, things really picked up for him. And that's when being a mark benefited me. He's like, Killer Kowalski trained. That's John Studd. It wasn't you. I know the truth. Mm-hmm. So I decided, all right, I'm going to check out Sully's gym. And I went to Sully's and they were just so completely honest. They just said, look, we can't guarantee anything. All we can guarantee you is that we'll train you to the best of our ability, but that comes down to how much effort you put in. Sigi's got a lot of connections here, there, and everywhere. Ron has connections in Ontario and out in the East Coast. We'll do what we can to get the ball rolling for you, but it's up to you to do it, and we'll back your play as much as we can. And I thought that is so honest. They didn't try to. I even said, yeah, Mac said he trained John Studd. They go, yeah, sounds like Mac. So I was like, well, okay. And they just seemed so honest that I felt drawn to that. So that's where I started training there.
Was Sully's gym, did they advertise in the Toronto Sun or on the tail end of Maple Leaf Wrestling, or am I confusing schools?
No, I know the one you're talking about. I think that was out in Willowdale or something. I think that one was way. Well, I remember because there was an advertisement on WWF Wrestling one time saying "Become a professional wrestler." It was like a 2-second blurb, and then my phone rang off the hook from all my buddies. Did you see that? Are you going or what? Because they knew I was obsessive, right? And so they didn't even have a phone number; just had a post box. So I sent them a letter and never got a message back. So I just started checking stuff out in the phone book, and Sully was right downtown.
Interesting. Hard to imagine in this day and age. So you trained under the legendary Ron Hutchison and Sweet Daddy Siki, as you touched on. Was that training? Looking back on it, was it? It sounds like they were a pretty honest operation, so they weren't going to take your money and try and drive you out. Would you describe that as overly physically rigorous in the old school sense, or how did you find the actual work itself?
The way they train, like we started doing this workout called PTA. Like I teach a lot of seminars now everywhere because I'm getting old, and people, my resume kind of sells me. I know what I'm talking about when I'm teaching. So I use a lot of the stuff they used for us, which there's a training session called PTA, pain, torture, and agony. It's the best cardio drill for wrestling ever. It'll beat the hell out of you. And it's actually what I used. I had my own TV show in England. It's called Celebrity Wrestling. I would coach a bunch of celebrities. D'Lo Brown coached a bunch of celebrities. They did we gave them wrestling gimmicks. They wrestled in American Gladiators type games. And then Roddy Piper hosted. It was really, I had fun. Didn't do well. We went up against Doctor Who, and Doctor Who kicked our ass because it's England. Yeah. But what are you gonna do? I still had a great time. But I used that to get myself hired, the PTA to get myself hired for that job, because it's just an impressive workout. So Ron they beat us up, but we only had Saturdays and Sundays there. So we get beat up for 2 days, then you had 5 days to recover. Whereas you got the Lance Storm School, where Lance does a block of 3 months. I think you're there 5 to 7 days a week, and he'll beat you up every day. So the training is rigorous, but at the same time, we had 5-day breaks in between.
So when you broke in, a lot of folks remember that you really came into a peer group, so to speak, that included some very notable people, including you had an early tag with Edge under the Sexton Hardcastle name, and
Yeah.
also a faction
cool,
that included Christian Cage and Rhino. Can you describe those early days breaking into the business with them?
I actually broke in before them. I helped kind of bring them along. I lucked out. I was training, my buddy Keith, he went under the name Zach Wild. We did a bunch of different matches around Ontario, and they were Siki and Ron, I guess, pulled some strings, and they were willing to give the young guys a shot, the opener type thing. So we got, a few opening gigs. Then Tiger Jeet Singh, I'm sure you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, his son was looking to train, so Siki pulled me aside and said, "Listen, do you mind coming here during the week?" I was like, "Sure, I'm always looking for more ring time." He said, "Well, I want you to, help train Tiger Jr." I was like, oh, "Okay." Like Siki only lived around the corner from the gym, so he could come all the time. So for 2 weeks, I helped train Tiger Jr. And after 2 weeks, Tiger Sr. came in and said, "Okay, let me have a look at him." He watched what he could do, and we only had a few things, but he did them very, very well. He said, "All right, that's good, thanks." And I'm like, "Oh, you're not happy?" He goes, No, that's everything he needs." I'm like, "Listen, not for nothing. I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but like, you're taking him to Japan. I know I'm not ready. And I'm the guy who showed him this stuff. Are you sure?" He's like, "He'll be coming with me. He's got the Jeet Singh name. He can do that stuff, which I'm not going to do at my age, and he can swing a chair. For FMW, it'll work fine." I said, "All right," well, shook hands, and that was it. He never promised me a thing. I was grateful for the extra ring time. They went to Japan. Tiger Jr. did great. But a week and a half, 2 weeks after they got back, Siki pulled me into the office again. He said, "Listen, do you got a passport?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Get one. You're going to Japan." I was like, "Hey?" He says, "Yeah, Tiger really appreciates everything you did." I was like, "Yeah, but he didn't promise me anything." He goes, "That's not Tiger. Tiger doesn't promise anything, but if you do something well, Tiger is, an honorable guy," and he absolutely is. I know Mick Foley talks some crap in his book about him, and I like Mick too. But my experience with Tiger is that he was nothing but great with me. So that kicked open the door to Japan. Then I went to Japan. By the time I came back, I got a booking in Winnipeg, and I started getting more bookings. And promoters seemed to like me. So I started bringing friends like, "Listen, I'm going. Why don't you bring Adam? Why don't you bring Keith? Why don't you bring Jay?" And that opened doors. Then we did a show. Adam and I tagged up against El Fuego and Zach Wild for OCW, Outlaw Championship Wrestling in Oshawa. And the referee there, A.T. Huck, was a booker for Detroit. And so he said, "We will have to have you guys down in Detroit." So they brought us down. And we originally said we were from New Jersey because the New Jersey Devils had just swept the Red Wings 4 straight for the Stanley Cup. So we come out wearing New Jersey Devils sweaters and bringing brooms to piss everybody off. And we did that for a while and got over well. And then they teased a breakup of me and Adam. And that got good heat with everybody. So we did a match, which went very well. And at the end of it, Christian came in and separated, say, "Come on, guys, let's be friends again." And then Rhino joined in. And then we became a faction. They wanted to call it the Canadian World Order, which I thought, that's kind of a budget name. So then Adam and Jay suggested, as much as I'd love to take credit, it was their idea. They said, "What about Thug Life?" And I was like, "Thug, okay, all right, why not?" And so we became the Canadian faction, Thug Life. And it was me, Edge, Christian, Rhino, and our manager, handsome Johnny Bradford, wrestling's only deaf manager. And we started burning the flag and the American flag in the ring, and we're this pro-Canadian group. And the thing is that we had great heat. We were selling out the small buildings we were doing, and the Thug Life thing had good heat. And then about 3 weeks after we started, Bret Hart did his pro-Canadian, anti-American thing and made ours look totally budget because his was so on fire with the monster company. But I can say we were 3 weeks ahead of the curve on that one.
Did they borrow that from you, the WWF?
Yeah,
do you think?
I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'm pretty sure they had some clever people on the go there. It's a coincidence, I think, but it just looked like, okay, we at least had our thumb on the pulse. The business was moving in that direction, and we were slightly ahead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What kind of odds is it that all your group there all had very long and successful Hall of Fame careers from a particular point in time? What are the odds against that, knowing what indie wrestling is like then and now, right?
I would say largely it would be long odds, but I think we came in just as the business was kind of shifting. Like if we come in just strictly in the early 80s, it was bigger guys and slower matches. When we came in, it was kind of, as we gained experience and got more matches, that was during the Attitude Era, where everything was kind of picking up speed and a little more off color, a little more risque. And so we had the old school kind of training from Ron and Siki to make sure we were grounded in a reality-based kind of product. But we also had the kind of Jerry Springer side of it where we could, draw heat in ways they didn't do in the early 80s. So I think it was the timing of Ron and Siki giving us an excellent foundation. I can't stress enough how indebted I am to those two guys, and how we all should be. If they don't think so, I don't know what their problem. I think we're all indebted to them tremendously. But having a good, solid foundation so that our matches still made sense along the way. So we could work with the old timers, we could work with the new guys, and we could keep up with the pace of what the wrestling fans were currently absorbing.
So I one of the things that struck me, which I think you have a unique claim to fame, is that you have wrestled in so many countries. I've read, and correct me if this is understated or whatnot, but having wrestled in 24 countries around the world, including
46.
How many?
46.
Wow. Okay. Understated then for sure. Including Russia.
And yeah, I've been there about 10 times. Yeah.
And you name it, aside from your fame for working in Europe, but in terms of some of those more esoteric countries that you don't think of wrestlers going to, what would you say was your favorite? And did you have any one of those moments where you thought perhaps you might be in a little bit of jeopardy, so to speak?
I can't pick one favorite because I try to find something good everywhere I go. Right? There you are. Oh, you disappeared on me now.
I'm still here.
Okay, no worries. I can't pick one to say is the best because overall, I find that I can find something good just about anywhere. Nigeria was my least favorite. That's a very, very corrupt place. I didn't like that very much. I wasn't big on Nigeria. In Kuwait, we had an issue where it was a 3-day trip. We were there for, I think, 6 days. It was 3 days of shows, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so we were told when we landed, we were going to get half our money when we landed and then half our money just before the show on the 3rd day. So we got there and we never got our money. And we kind of hinted at, like, listen, we're not trying to be jerks here. They have us at a nice hotel. They're taking us out all these different places. We're very appreciative. But at the same time, we'd like to get paid, And it got down to the day of the first show, and two of the guys on the team had been to Beirut for a different series of events, and they found out the promoters for the Beirut thing were also involved with this one. They had to go to the Canadian consulate to get out of Beirut because the promoters just took the money and ran. So they were like, we're not letting that happen again. So we basically, it was me, Jason Anderson, and Carl Willett. And we essentially unionized the locker room and said, listen, we're not going out for the first show until we get paid. And they were like, well, no, you can come see the money. I said, I don't want to see the money. I want my cash. Like, don't be like this. So we all got, and they wanted to only give us half our money. He's like, no, you forfeited that right when you didn't uphold your side. So we held it up. We got all our money for that. When we got to the hotel the first day, we got this letter saying, we're covering your hotel. Your hotel is being covered. It was EWC, Eastern Wrestling Championship or Coalition or something. So we're taking care of your hotel. We're taking care of your meals. You got to take care of your drinks and your phone bills, which is more than fair, especially for me because I don't drink. So I'm golden, right? So at the end of the 3rd day, I had my phone with me, but I forgot my charger, and they had chargers at the front desk. So I was just sitting in the lobby letting them charge my phone. They were being very nice. And then one of the guys who was there was leaving really early in the morning, called me over and said, hey, I think there's a problem. I'm like, what? He said, they're putting letters under people's doors. And I got one. He showed it to me. And it said that the credit card they used to book the hotel had been pulled. So the hotel was owed for all the rooms, all the meals, all that nonsense. And so, that is in Kuwait anyways, that's fraud. They'll jail you. I do not want to go to a Kuwaiti jail. Mm-hmm. So I ran to all the rooms knocking on doors. Guys, there's a problem here. So we got everybody together. The promoter's daughter kind of ran the thing. Real nice girl. Mofida, I think was her name. Really, really pretty, really nice girl. So we called her and said, listen, what the hell's going on here? So she came in. She was baffled by it all. It turns out the guys from Beirut had put their card down for it, and then they pulled their card, took the money, and left. So she had to call her dad in the middle of the night to come pay all the bills of cash. Fortunately, her dad's like a gazillionaire sheik. So that was, that was his tip money. But he was, it was a blessing that happened. But for a short time there, we were at risk of being arrested and thrown in jail in Kuwait if we hadn't got a hold of them. So that was ugly.
Yeah, not pleasant. What about Russia? How did that come about? And I understand, according to the research, that you had a match or two against Raven there, and even held the title there.
Yeah. Okay, I was finishing up with TNA. No, sorry, I finished up with Puerto Rico, and I was on my way to TNA. I think it was it? Nope, I was finished up with TNA. So it was 2004. So I was finishing up with TNA, and I was getting ready to move to Germany. At the last minute, a promoter in Germany, Christian Eckstein, calls me and says, hey, Joe, we got this tour lined up for Russia. You want to do it? I was like, actually, if you could fly me to Russia from Canada and then to Germany, you'll save me like an $800 flight. He's like, yeah, not a problem. So part of it was they sorted Joe out. So I went over for the first shot there, and the show was really well received. It was a big like opera theater, big circular opera theater. Very, very ritzy. It didn't seem like it was right for a wrestling show, but the crowd was nuts for the whole thing. But I want to say it only held about 800-900 people, but it was pretty close to sold out. And so one of the guys who worked there asked for my email address because he runs promotions in Moscow. And I want to say a year or two later, because I totally forgotten about it, he buzzed me and said, would you like to come back? And so they booked me back for another show. That went well. Then they booked me back to do a stadium show. I won their belt on the stadium show. Came back for a couple more gigs, and they said, listen, can you get like a big ex-WWF name? And I know Raven had just finished up with one of the companies. And Scott's a pal. Scott's a great guy. And I said, well, I'm sure he'd be interested. He loves seeing, crazy out of the way places you wouldn't normally see. And so I just put them in touch, let them do their deal. I wouldn't ask for a fee or anything like that. And so, yeah, they brought in Scott to work with me, and we ended up doing a big arena thing. The great thing about that was it was part of an extreme sports show. So they had like jumping motorcycles and BMX stuff and crazy skateboard nonsense. They had this giant wavy ramp that went up probably about 70 feet. And there was two of them, and in between them there was a platform, and they put the ring up there. So we had to go up there. So Scott and I basically, we started in the ring, fought, rolled down the ramp, fought in the middle part, rolled down the rest of the ramp, fought around. They had barrels there on fire, and we were hitting each other with all kinds of crap. Then fought our way back up the ramp and finished the match in the ring up top. But there's like 5,000 or 6,000 people for that. It was a sellout for that, and just a crazy atmosphere.
Is there tape of that by chance? Is it on YouTube?
I bet you they have it. I've never asked for it, but I bet you if I contact them, I could probably find it. Mind you, there's a lot of the Russian stuff on YouTube, but you have to type it in the Russian alphabet, and I don't have that on my computer. Because people have sent me, did you see this? And it's like all written with the backwards R and stuff. So I'm like, I forgot I did that. Holy crap, how'd that get on there? So I bet you there's a bunch of that stuff on, if you can, plug in your
translator
Russian keyboard. Yeah, you might be able to find it.
Yeah, that's super, super cool. So backing it up a bit, in 2000, you signed a deal with, of course, the WWF, and late 99, and they pitched you could you walk the fans through as to how that happened and what creative had for you initially, please?
Initially, I got flown in for a tryout, and they liked me, but they didn't have a spot for me. So I was out just, still working. So I was out working in the East Coast of Canada for Rene Dupree's dad, Emile Dupree, Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. So I was having a really good summer out there. And I get a call late in the summer from Christian. And he says, when does the maritime thing end? And I said, I think the 5th, September 5th, something like that. He says, okay, well, Terry Taylor's going to call you shortly. They want to bring you in for another look-see because they want you to be a new Freebird. I was like, what? He says, yeah, the Michael Hayes wants to reboot the Freebirds, and he wants the next generation. He wants you and Reckless Youth, and they're going to find a third guy, and they want you to be the Terry Gordy of the team. I was like, well, that's flattering as hell. All right, well, he says, it's going to call you. And like less than 10 minutes later, Terry Taylor calls me. So they say, when are you done? I said the 5th. They go, great. Can we just fly you from there and bring you in on the 6th? We can do your tryout on the 7th. We'll have you out by the 8th. We won't eat up your time. I'm like, eat up all of my time that you want. It's fine. I will forgive you. So they flew me in. I don't know if hopefully everybody knows Reckless Youth. He's one of the best talents that hasn't got enough attention. He's great. So they just had Reckless and I at the training center there in Connecticut have a match. We put together a match in like 10 minutes. Had a really good match. I would have been proud to have that on any show. And Terry Taylor pulled us aside and said, I have to hire you after that. And the thing is also, I have to give credit to Jim Cornette, because when I did my first tryout at Skydome, there was 60,000 people there. He was very, very helpful to me. He before the match, he's like, listen, don't be surprised if the audience doesn't go crazy for you. They're here for Austin. We know what we're looking for. Don't let that flush you. He was very, very helpful. And at the end of it, he said, we'll be in touch. And then if I called him, he'd answer his phone. He wouldn't just let it go to voicemail. He was very, very helpful. And actually, when I come over to Germany, I called home just to, check in with my mom, to make sure she's okay. And she's like, yeah, some hyper guy named Jim called for you. And I was like, Jim, like Cornette? She goes, yeah, that's his name. I go, give me the number. So I got like an armload of change because it's all payphones back then. And Cornette was telling me, yeah, we want to bring you in. We really think this is going to be a good thing for you. I'm like, well, I'm in Germany for the next month and a half. He's like, great. I'm like, why? That sounds bad. Like, I'll leave. I'll come home if you guys can guarantee me a job. And he says, no, this is going to make you look better to the office because, wrestling's like a bitchy girlfriend. It's only interested when somebody else is. And I'm like, okay. So I stuck it out there, and then let me know when you're back. And I let him know when I was back, and he brought me in for a second tryout, and that's what got them to want me to come in. So I was all prepared to be a new Freebird. And then it took him 8 or 9 months to get me my work visa for the States. No idea why. It took them, I think, an hour and a half to get Trish Stratus's. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a hot factor I don't have. So she got hers. I didn't get mine. So it took 8 or 9 months. And then by the time they brought me in, Hayes had decided he didn't want to be a manager. He didn't want to be on camera anymore. He just wanted to be an agent for the tag division. And so I was kind of left twisting. Mm-hmm. And they flew me into Connecticut to meet Vince. Me and 2 other guys. I can't remember who they are now. One big bodybuilder guy. He's huge. But they flew us in, and I made the last flight out of Toronto before a blizzard closed the airport. And I was like fretting on the plane. If they cancel this, I'm going to lose my freaking mind because I was so excited, to go. Mm-hmm. And they brought me in. I had a sit down with Vince for probably a half hour, and he was super complimentary. Like, he said, I just watched one of your matches, and you're like the halfway point between Mick Foley and Ted DiBiase. I'm like, wow, like, thank you so much. Like, to hear that from anybody be complimentary, but for a guy who's made these guys millionaires, I mean, that's flattering as hell. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Kelly had called me a month prior to just get a listing of my history. What have you done on martial arts? You've done this, you've done that. What have you done? So we can try to plug in a character for you. I'm like, okay. And one of the things I mentioned I did, and I shouldn't have. I should have known better. This is my fault. I said that on the northern tours, like we were doing the Indian reservations in Manitoba, Don Callis couldn't make it. He got sick or something. So they asked if I'd work twice a night. I said, yeah, sure. I don't care. So they put a medical outfit on me and a mask, and they said, just go there as Dr. X. And I did. And of course, as for a Dr. X character, nobody's going to care, right? So the next night I pulled the goat, sorry, the ring announcer, called her the goat, pulled her aside and said, don't tell him I'm Dr. X. Say I'm from San Francisco General Disease or Communicable Disease Ward. San Francisco General Hospital communicable disease ward, and I'm the male nurse. And they brought me out, and I made Goldust look butch. I swanned about, and I'd take a hip toss, and I'd hump the referee's leg, and I'd take a bump and roll out and sit on a guy's lap at ringside and play with his hair. I was a complete jerk. But I had fun doing it. It was a good gag. And in my defense, I get back through the curtain, and Bad News Allen, who always, like a great guy, they always had that sour look on his face, had tears in his eyes laughing. He said, "The dumbest thing I ever saw. Don't let Vince see you do that." And then, like an idiot, I told Kevin Kelly I did it. Oops. So then Vince looks at this paper, and he looks at me, and he says, "So you did the male nurse, huh?" I'm like, "Oh, dear God, no. Oh, no." He said, "It says here it made Goldust look butch." I'm like, "Uh-huh." He's like, "I never want to see that." I'm like, "Thank you so much." I thought they were going to make me a transsexual Nazi Eskimo or something. So I wasn't into that. And then they just started putting me in dark matches. And then out of the blue, they said, "Okay, tonight we're cutting your hair and this is your gimmick." And they gave me that god-awful Just Joe thing.
How was that pitched to you originally, and what were your thoughts?
Well,
I think you've explained it a bit, but
it was, I don't want to say it's my fault. It's kind of my fault, I guess. When I was thinking of gimmicks, I said, first of all, I pitched a cult leader gimmick because it was around an anniversary of that Waco, Texas thing.
Koresh.
David Koresh and all that. Yeah. So I said, I just find cults scary. You know, the fact that, you tell somebody, "Here, go shoot that guy in the face. I'll give you $20. And like, no, of course not. Like, under the right circumstances, under the right guilt trip, they'll pay me $20 to go kill the guy because they don't want to be offensive to God type thing. So, that's scary stuff. So I pitched that to Vince, and Vince was like, "I don't know, we're kind of non-religious, non-partisan." And in my mind, I'm going, Ministry of Darkness, Brother Love, Reverend Devon. Mm-hmm. All right. Didn't say that because, I want the job. And then I pitched, I said, I'd like to do a thing where I cut my hair real short, wear a suit and tie, because it's right at the tail end of the grunge era, saying that, the American kids are just a bunch of bums now. They need to cut their hair and get a real job and straighten up and fly right and call our group the moral majority. Mm. And he says, I don't really see a lot of motion in that. And I'm like, your whole audience are fucking kids with, crazy hair and piercings. This is ideal, but he wouldn't go for it. And then, of course, shortly later, the Right to Censor gets on. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But then I kept kind of needling about the cult leader thing because I had a good feeling about it. And I said, it's not necessarily religious. I'm not saying I'm God. I'm just saying I'm the messenger. And Vince does the complete Mr. Man. The messenger does the strokey chin thing. Don't blame me. I'm just the messenger.
Oh, boy.
And then he turns to Bruce and, okay, talk to legal and make sure the term the messenger isn't copyright and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's what turned on. Originally, it was supposed to be something along the lines of, like, I'd be backstage, you see Crash Holly just holding his head, and I'd be like, something wrong? It's like, I got to wrestle Taz tonight, and Taz is going to, kick rape me and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, well, if you had the right information, you might be able to beat him. And then he kind of greases me a little money, and then I say, well, Taz tore his bicep. If you go after his arm, and then he goes out and wins. And we start doing things like that where I'm the guy with all the information backstage. I have like medical files and stuff in my hand. I'm the inside guy. And then somehow it would intertwine with the acolytes, the acolytes protection thing, right? So, if people couldn't get the job done with me, then they'd hire the acolytes who'd go out and kick ass because they couldn't do it. And that's everything. And the acolytes would get information from me. That was supposed to be the original thing. And then it just went pear-shaped, and they just went in a completely different direction where I pulled Shane aside at one point. I said, listen, not for nothing. Like, I want to talk to Honest with you, okay? And Shane's a great guy. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, go ahead. I'm like, you guys are booking me out of a job. He's like, no, we love your work, and, we just got to find the right vehicle. I'm like, yeah, but you're booking me out of a job. Every time I get the slightest bit of heat, you scrub me. Like, the whole heat on this character is he gets away with murder. He's like Jimmy Hart never quite gets hit, and then at WrestleMania somebody finally bashes him in the head and the place goes nuts. But you beat up Jimmy Hart every day, who cares? And it's the same with this. You're beating me too much to the point where I'm not valuable to you and there's no reason to keep me around. Like financially, you don't have a good reason to keep me here. And I want to make money, but I want to make you guys money too. I want to be a valued commodity here. And so he said, well, let me go talk and see what I can do. And I'm sure he did, but they didn't. The writer they gave me, this guy Jamie, was an idiot. He wouldn't listen to anybody. Every time I suggested something, he just kind of dismissed it. And then somebody else would say the same thing to him, and then he'd say it was a brilliant idea. So he had something against getting input from me, I guess. And then that's where everything went sour.
Yeah, that makes zero sense. So did I read in here somewhere that Pat Patterson was involved too with your situation somehow on the periphery, or?
Oh, you mean the where I was going to beat him up?
Yeah. Was that related to your booking or no?
No, because I was booked in for my first contracted deal, like my first weekly. I was flown into Vancouver, and then we had to drive down to Tacoma, Washington. So I get to Tacoma, and I had my fiance then, my wife now, she's German. And I went out and did dark match. It was in a tag match. I remember that with the Dupp brothers. I think it was me and Scott Vick against the Dupps. And so we went out and did our match. And when I come back, she's looking all upset. I was like, what's the problem? And she goes, who's that guy over there? She points to Patterson. I said, oh, it's Pat. He's kind of a big wheel here. She goes, he was a jerk. I'm like, how so? And she said, well, he came over to me and demanded I leave. And she goes, well, here's my pass. And I'm not going in the locker room. I'm staying out here in the main area. I'm not trying to be in the way. If I'm in the way, I'll move. He goes, and he was like, no. She goes, well, I'm here with Joe Legend. He's working. He goes, he doesn't work here. I don't know that name. And she goes, well, he was just in the opening match. If you look on the sheet, it'll show you. And he said, you talk funny. Where are you from? And she goes, I'm from Germany. He goes, oh, that's why you sound like that. And he walked away. I thought that was ignorant. I said, well, I guess I'm getting fired. So I start marching over, and I guess I had a face on. So I start walking over towards him, beelining right towards him. And Christian comes over, Joe, you all right, buddy? You look upset. I said, yeah, it was nice working with you for this weekend, but it looks like I'm getting fired. I'm about to kick the shit out of Patterson. And he goes, why? So I explained it. And I just start to walk away from him. And he's like, Adam. And so Edge comes over. And Jay explains it to him. So Adam's like, hey, calm down. Then Jericho comes over. What the fuck? What do you guys what's the noise? And so Jericho talks logic to me. And he's like, listen, there's no way Patterson would talk to Taker's wife like that. Right? Get yourself cemented in, get a good spot, and then you can mouth off back. But don't throw away your entire future because of one mouthy day. And he made sense. Now, in hindsight, the way the career went, I might as well have friggin' battered him. But I think all three of the guys had my best interest at heart. So I reluctantly walked away from it. I was walking towards him. I was ready to go over and slap him in the face and tell him he's a prick and blah, blah, blah. But that had nothing to do with my booking. My booking came after that. My bad booking came after that.
Gotcha. Did you ever have any other encounters with him, or that was just a one and done situation?
Pretty much a one and done. After that, occasionally he'd come in and watch my pre-tapes and stuff. And I would ask, because he was a brilliant wrestling mind. As a person, maybe not the best in the world. But, I mean, I would sit in the arena hours before a pay-per-view with Rock, Austin, Taker, Hunter, Kurt, whoever was doing the main event. They'd be piecing their match together, and I'd just be, fly on the wall. Wouldn't say a word, just be sitting off in the distance, but trying to learn. And then Patterson would come up and sit down, and they'd all have this great match put together. And then he would go, oh, all right, but what about this? And he would have 3 little suggestions, but it completely altered the structure and made it 1,000 times better. So I thought, well, if nothing else, the guy's here anyways. I might as well learn from him. So occasionally I would go up to him and ask him for bits of advice and stuff like that. So we get along in that respect. But I never made it a conscious effort to kind of go up and, hey, Pat, how you been? Shake his hand, because I didn't, maybe I'm just too much of a grudge holder.
Or too straight up. So what happened in terms of, given the fact that your run was relatively brief there, was it a situation where you decided you saw the writing on the wall and they didn't really want to use you in the way that you could be used, and that was a decision that you made, or how did that come to an end?
WCW. I'd done time there. I finished up on the road with them in January. I think after that, I think it was Judgment Night pay-per-view. think it was called Judgment Night. I did a bit backstage with Rock and Austin, right? And then they told me, okay, we're sending you to Memphis to rebrand you, because I've been telling them for a while, I got to get out of this gimmick because you're killing me. So they sent me down to Memphis, and I was living in Memphis for about 3 months and trying to get something new off the ground. But once again, like Randy Hales wouldn't listen, and nobody would listen. They kept trying to kind of force the old stupid gimmick. I'm like, no, I'm trying to get out of this gimmick. And at one point there, I was all set. I was like, okay, listen, I'm pulling these guys into a meeting. We're going to have this, now or never type moment. And I get a call from Kevin Kelly. He says, oh, Vince just bought WCW. I was like, oh, wow, really? Like the whole thing? Yep, the whole thing. He's got the library, which means, he owns all intellectual properties and blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. So I'm not sure why you took time out of your day to announce that to me. I could see that on the internet. He goes, well, the thing is that they're letting guys go who they don't have immediate plans for, because they have all these guys coming up from WCW who they will be using for the next year. And you're not in the current plan, so we're releasing you. So it was buying WCW and I mean, I would especially be high on the list of get out because I'm Canadian. So they have to pay for a work visa for me in the States. Whereas, the American guys, they could probably keep on board because they're already there. But because I'm Canadian, it's extra money. So it was the right financial decision for them to bounce out me. Jason Sensation was another one, Canadian guy, who, they don't want to pay for a visa if you're not going to be using the guy. So since they didn't have to worry about anybody jumping ship to another company, I mean, Heyman jumped on board, so ECW was pretty much done, and WCW was all bought up. So there's no real threat of anybody going to the other company and doing any business. Not that I would have been a giant threat, because they didn't use me enough for it to be a huge, holy shit, he's here now, but he was on WWF last week. I wasn't used well enough to be a huge factor.
Just as an aside, since you brought it up, from a historical perspective, do you may have some insight as to why that invasion was botched so badly, given the fact you tweaked something in my memory that, the excuse was that they were going to use all these guys, and they really didn't use that's right, misuse those guys. How do you think that was a tremendously lost opportunity with tons of money left on the table, especially when they were going to run a separate WCW brand?
If they were going to run a WCW brand, that would have been great. But they didn't have all the top guys that people took as top WCW guys. I mean, Scott Steiner was in the top spot. He didn't come over. Goldberg was their golden child. He didn't come over. So they really didn't have that to make the invasion matter. They had, I don't want to disparage, because a lot of those guys are really, really, really good, just maybe not used in the right spot. But they had guys perceived as mid-carders who were going to come in and work the main event guys for WWF. They can't look like that much of a threat. If they were going to do that, they should have, paid out contracts and brought in the big names. And they needed to let the bad guys win for a while so that the good guys could triumph in the end. But instead, they just kind of knocked them down. I mean, if you watch, I don't have the network, but every time I see something advertised, it's, here's this week we're talking about the Monday Night Wars, and then this week we're talking about WWF versus WCW. We know you won. I mean, if anything, I wouldn't have gone on TV every week and say how much WCW sucked. Now that you own the properties, you could still sell. I mean, at the time they were still selling DVDs. You could have sold a ton of WCW DVDs saying this was such an awesome show. Holy crap, Sting is so good. When will he come? You could have really big them up. And then when they come over for the invasion, it seems like they're a real legitimate threat. But when you say, oh, we kicked the shit out of them for, months and months and months, and now they're coming over here, now we're going to kick the shit out of them again. How much of a threat is that?
And maybe let Sting go over at WrestleMania.
Sting should have gone over in that. If Sting was only coming in for the one and done, then I get putting Hunter over. But having Sting come in, and he's going to be a regular member of the roster, it made high quality sense to put him over. That would have, ultra star him for that company. He was an ultra star for WCW, but he was that guy for WWE. Him going over Hunter in his initial appearance, people would have been, oh my God, he's the guy. You could have got several main events, like pay-per-views out of him, whether it's tags or singles or gimmick matches. Instead, no, he lost to him, and then he lost to, I think it was Seth Rollins, and he messed up his neck with a buckle bomb and such. So, I mean, crowd's still chanting, "You still got it," but they didn't believe he was going to win anything after he lost 100. The thought that he's going to win big in that company all of a sudden dropped. So I think that was a mistaken booking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So then you moved on to be a part of what was a highly touted company at the time, the World Wrestling All Stars promotion under that Andrew McManus fellow, and you often worked Mike Sanders, and you had some good quality matches there. What went? I remember there were the first pay-per-view and then the second pay-per-view, and then it trailed off. But it seemed to be, with Brett making an appearance, it seemed to be like this company's kind of got some juice to it to be at least a player in the marketplace, and it didn't turn out that way. Being the fact that you were on those a lot of those shows, what went wrong there, and what was your impression of it when you became involved?
Well, actually, I kind of inadvertently got involved because Scott D'Amore was involved with it. And I've been teaching at Scott's school in Windsor before I moved back here to Germany. Scott buzzed me and said, "Yeah, we're doing this tour of, I think it was England, Ireland, Scotland, and Switzerland. Do you know any referees we can use so we don't have to fly them over from the States?" And I was like, "I can make some calls. I know tons of guys all over Europe." I said, "But listen, Joe wouldn't mind working those too." And so Scott got me on board. So it was down to Scott D'Amore putting in a word for me. So thank you, Scott, for when he listens. I'm sure he'll be listening. Everything was okay, but the trouble was that they only had the ex-WWE guys and ex-WCW guys, and they didn't have young build-up guys, right? I think part of any big upcoming promotion needs to be some solidified players that are big deals, and then guys you want to be big deals interacting with them so they get the rub. And WWE didn't do that. WWE just kind of had, okay, we're going to have all these big guys. Anybody who's not necessarily a name, we're going to beat them. So in turn, every show costs so much more because you got to spend so much money bringing in these names. And a lot of these guys also had been around a while. Bumping hurts after a while. They're not young, so they're bumping less on these tours. You need hungry guys who are going to really bust their ass to try and let the crowd know that this is the new product in town, and we're the guys who are going to give you the best product. And I think Lex was coming back from an injury. Sting always works hard. Buff Bagwell was there. They had a bunch of guys there who drew attention, and we had some big arenas.
Glenn Gilberti, Disco.
Yeah, Disco was there.
A big part. Yeah.
When we went to Australia and New Zealand, Shane Douglas was there. I had a really good match with Sabu on the pay-per-view in New Zealand. It was really good. I was really happy with that.
That was the second one, correct?
Well, they'd had a few pay-per-views. The second one I'd done, but I think they'd done one or two before I got on board with the company. I think they did one in Vegas, which I wasn't on board with. But I did the one pay-per-view because the tour in Europe, I think it was 15 or 16 dates between England, Ireland, Scotland, Switzerland. And we did the pay-per-view out of Scotland. I think it was out of Glasgow. Anyway, point is it was out of Scotland. And then the other one we did the tour of Australia and New Zealand. We did Sydney and Melbourne for just town shows, and then the pay-per-view was in Auckland. So those were the tours I did for WWE, and I was excited about it. McManus was a big deal promoter. He promoted, the Symphony and Metallica concert.
Symphony and Metallica,
yeah. He promoted that in Australia, and he was getting ready to promote the Kissin' Symphony. And that was like a week before we were supposed to come, and I was begging, "Please bring me in. I'll tear tickets. I'll do security. Let me wear the paint." I'm like, I'm a big metalhead. I'll do it. You didn't bring me. Now, I read his article. Apparently, he's in jail for importing drugs or something. So things have gone wrong for poor Mr. McManus. He always treated me great. So I hope that those charges aren't true.
And there's a conditional release in his future. Got a fan question here. Wants to know, what do you think about Vince McMahon? Building back on your earlier discussion with him, but I think just in general, and maybe his legacy and the fact that he's still ever present in the organization.
he kind of is the Mr. McMahon gimmick. I think, like, on one hand, he can be a terrible bastard. I think that goes without saying. I do think, though, that there is a good guy in there somewhere, because, like, him and Harley Race had their heat, but when Harley got sick and needed to be moved to a hospital, Vince sent the private jet to do it, and Vince forgave Brett for the punch, and he brought Jimmy Snuka back after that whole unpleasantness with killing a girl or something. So I think there is some good stuff. And I mean, people say that the wellness policy is, just a political move so the company looks good. Well, maybe. But at the same time, it is doing a lot of good for a lot of people. I mean, Scott Hall getting cleaned up, and, a bunch of these guys who were really bad off getting cleaned up and cleaning up their lives and living better lives. So even if the intention is just political, the reality is he's helped a lot of people with that. So I'll give him credit for that. I think, like anybody, there's good and bad to him. He has a different set of morals than me, because I'm an obsessive parent. I have two 15-year-old sons, my best friends in the world. And if I had daughters, they'd be my best friends in the world. I love my kids, right? I couldn't, even if my kid was totally cool with it, if I had a daughter, I couldn't put her in an arena every week with 15, 16,000 people chanting slut at her. Mm-hmm. Even though she's like, oh, it's business, I don't care, it doesn't bother me. I couldn't do that as a parent. He can, and he's a billionaire. I can't, I am not a billionaire. Mm-hmm. So our morals are different, but ultimately that's, maybe that's where he is far more financially successful than me. So, like, I can't really judge the guy. I can just judge my actions around what he does and whether or not I could do the same.
Yeah, and you can't say that he hasn't forgiven and buried the hatchet if he says for the fans, or if it's best for business. He certainly has done that numerous times.
Sure.
Thinking of Sable and other people that have sued the company. A fan on social media wanted me to ask you about your friendship with who you mentioned briefly earlier, Don Cyrus Callis, and your thoughts on his success in recent years in AEW and that bizarre incident in AAA a couple of weeks ago where he was attacked. Do you know the inside on that by chance?
I don't have the insight on that. I can say that I heard Cornette's podcast, and they played the audio from it, and I could hear, well, I guess the guy grabbed Don by the neck or something, and all I goes, Conan. That's Don to a T. That's Don. Like, it's his, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing? I see that all the time, because he got me booked in South Africa years and years ago. My first tour down there. I've been there a bunch of times since, but the first time I went was in '95 for in Durban for Ish Maharaj. He got us down there, and we were walking along, me, him, Chi Cruz, and maybe Eric Freeze. The whole gang of us were walking along middle of the night, and we're walking along over by the beach area, and there was a little brick wall, and there was a bug crawling along. I didn't see it until Chi goes, look at that. It was this huge bug the size of my hand. And Don screamed like a lady and jumped up on the steel wall, or on the stone wall. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, his name was the Natch. I was like, the Natch doesn't like bugs. So immediately Cheech gets down on his knees and pokes it, and he, don't touch it. He's losing his mind. So I found that hilarious. Don was good to me. I went out to Winnipeg a ton of times with him. I worked him a ton of times. I think he's got a good mind for the business. I think sometimes he allows inside jokes to pollute what could be a better angle. Like, he's kind of booking the gag for the locker room over the angle for the fans. I think that's where he's one of the best talkers in the business. Really, I think, on the mic. He's not a guy who runs on catchphrases. But I mean, and I don't want to say like I'm judging audiences or anything, but sometimes he uses $10 words on a $2 audience. So he winds up using words to the audience, like he's like, oh, I'm so smart and you're so dumb. And then he uses all these words, and people are like, oh, I guess I am dumb. As opposed to them going, hey, shut up, I'm not dumb. Like Bobby Heenan wouldn't do that. He was the brain, and he always let the people think they were smarter than him, even though he called himself the brain. So I think Don creates a character that is smarter than the audience. There should be. And then the audience kind of backs down a little bit instead of attacking him. Like, they should be hot at him. You're not smarter than me, you son of a bitch. That's the standard kind of smarty pants heel manager. I think he's great for business. I think if he's convincing a cameraman to jump him in a press scrum that doesn't have fans around, guy knows how to get heat. I mean,
Yeah,
40 years ago, everybody would have been cheering him in the business, saying that's how you do it. That's old school. Modern, oh no, we're going to get sued. Da, da, da. Which, you know, is a valid concern in the modern day. Everybody's so litigious. Mm-hmm. I think he's a good guy to have on the TV. You should limit his time, because he'll take the mic and go for a month if you let him. But I think you get the most value out of him. Give him a 10-minute segment and then let him sell you tickets. I think he's an excellent talent.
Yeah, and some of my favorite commentary to this day in ECW, I thought he was brilliant with Joey Styles. I mean, what a team they were, for sure.
Yeah, let me tell you something, Styles.
Yeah, just hilarious stuff.
The whole network angle was quite good.
Yeah, 100%. They don't make it like that anymore. As I suspected, we have burned through an hour. I was just about to, and I think this would be a good place to pause. Get into your very successful tenure in TNA and a myriad of other topics. If you're available, we'd love to have you back for part 2, Joe.
Happy to.
That's tremendous. Until then, where can the fans find you on social media? And I know you're quite active in a variety of endeavors still. Do you have anything that the fans need to know that's happening?
Let's see. On Twitter, it's Lord Joey Legend. The reason is I got a Scottish lordship as a gift, and so I use that to be a nuisance.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm legitimately a lord now. Cool. So yeah, this Lord, and then there's also Joey Legend on Facebook. It's with the little picture of me with the Japanese belt on my shoulder. That's my wrestling page. But there's also my authors pages and such. So I have those. There's a release. It's August 21st, I think it is. August 21st is the release date, because there's a book I've kind of co-authored. And it's called Marie's World, and it's being re-released. Basically, Crystal McCarrington is the head writer on it, and it's involving wrestling, but it's mostly kind of a, for lack of a better term, kind of a soap opera-ish story, but it's around the world of wrestling. And so that book is being re-released, because we had it with one publisher. Now we moved to a different publisher, and so that book is being re-released on August 21st, and then it's going to be a whole series where I think we're releasing a book a month. So cool. If you look at my Facebook page, I'll keep everybody up to date on that. I know August 21st. I'm pretty sure she told me August 21st. But I'll be posting stuff on my Facebook page and on Twitter. And I don't know what my Instagram is, because somebody sent me a video to Facebook, and I tried to watch it, and I had to click like 5 things, and all of a sudden I'm on Instagram, and I have an Instagram account. So I'm assuming it's Joey Legend on Instagram, but I don't know. I didn't set it up. Or I did set it up, but I don't know how the hell I did it.
Do you have any wrestling appearances coming up? I'm assuming you do.
I'm teaching. I got seminars upcoming, but that'll all be on my page as well. I got a ton of seminars upcoming. I've got a tour in Scotland upcoming in September. I believe I'm going back to South Africa shortly. I just did South Africa the other month. Golly, I don't have my calendar in front of me.
You know what? No worries. We will definitely have you back. I've got a lot more content to get to, and I know the fans are continuing to send in questions. So I do appreciate your time, and we'll keep the fans up to date when we will schedule part 2.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed that.
That's it, fans, for another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast with Joey Legend. As I've said, stay tuned. We'll be back for part 2. But until then, see you next time.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter